You may have heard about something called the fight or flight response. When you are under threat or afraid, your whole being gears up for a fight or fuels up to run away. For thousands of years, these two strategies have helped us survive whenever we have faced trouble. Whether it's to fight or to run, this response is designed to be quick, immediate and aggressive. It's like a firework, explosive and spectacular, but then disappears. But what if the pressure or pain is not an immediate threat, but a long-term, slow-burning problem? What then? Everything we know about stress tells us that long-term or chronic stress has devastating effects on our health, physical, mental and emotional. The fight and flight response is simply not designed to deal with long-term stress. There are many of you watching this who have been dealing with pain which goes back years, and for some may have started back in your childhood. There are all kinds of conditions, sometimes called syndromes, which are connected to chronic stress and may be difficult to spot, as well as complicated to diagnose. Let me take you to a very moving story in the Old Testament about a character who was suffering with chronic pain and stress. I will try to show you his life and how it might connect to yours. His story takes place during the time of King David, Israel's second, and some say greatest king. The backstory starts at a fight called the Battle of Mount Gilboa. A key soldier in the battle is a man of great integrity named Jonathan. He is the son of Israel's first king, Saul. He is brother to two other soldiers and is best friend to David, the man who would become king. During the course of the battle, Jonathan and his two brothers are killed. Saul, badly wounded, takes his own life, an act considered illegal and shameful. News of these deaths comes back quickly to Jonathan's home. His nanny picks up Jonathan's 5-year-old son to flee for their lives. Families of defeated kings were routinely slaughtered. In her haste, she drops the boy, who's badly injured in both feet, rendering him permanently unable to walk. The boy's name is Mephibosheth, and on one day, everything in his life has changed. This little lad has lost his father, his two uncles, his grandfather, his security, his home and his health in one traumatic episode. His name means from the mouth of shame, and from 5 years old onwards, his life will be a massive challenge. We don't meet him again in the history books until he is an adult with a son of his own, maybe 15 years later. He is living as a lodger in someone else's home in a place called Lo-Debar, which literally means land of nothing. When we hear him speak, he calls himself a dead dog. A terrible term to use, but that is perhaps how he has experienced his 15 years or so. They didn't use the words then, but today we would call his experience post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as chronic stress. While Mephibosheth was dealing with his chronic stress, which would have consisted of anger and change, David, his father's best friend, had fought many battles and become king. In a lull in the fighting, David remembers his dear friend Jonathan and asks his servants if there is anyone left of Jonathan's family. Unearthing an old servant of Saul, they inform him of Mephibosheth. David has him brought to his court, and there is a touching exchange between them. 3 times David reveals his heart. Here is what he says before the meeting and then as they met. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" The king asked, "Is no one still left in the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" And then to Mephibosheth himself, "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan." There you have it. The best medicine for chronic stress is kindness. David restores Saul's land to Mephibosheth, and he invites him to eat permanently at his table. David provides him with a large staff to farm the land, and so gives him security for the rest of his life. David's kindness consisted of extravagant generosity and permanent hospitality. It was a double-edged act which poured all manner of healing into Mephibosheth's soul. It did not heal his inability to walk, nor did it erase the memories of his trauma. It did not bring back his father, grandfather and uncles, but it did something powerful in his soul. It's worth taking a slightly deeper dive into Mephibosheth's pain and David's kindness. We do know that he lost 4 key male figures in his life: his father, his grandfather and 2 uncles. Mephibosheth faced a life without fatherhood. One long-term stress that he had to deal with was what that did to his own view of himself as a man. When we hear him speak, he calls himself a dead dog. Someone who has known the love, encouragement and advice of a real father does not see themselves like that. Mephibosheth's self-esteem was extremely low. Immediately you can see that David's kindness spoke into that pain. David was his father's best friend. Now he was pouring fatherly kindness into Mephibosheth's life. No one can replace an actual father, but kindness from a male figure can pour balm into what some have called the father wound. David's kindness also reformatted Mephibosheth's life path. Had Saul lived, his son Jonathan would have become king, and Mephibosheth would have been the son and probably the heir to the throne. His life pain was utterly demolished by the Battle of Mount Gilboa. His life path was utterly demolished by the Battle of Gilboa. Long-term stress feeds the sense of meaninglessness of life. David brought Mephibosheth back into the royal household, permanently giving him status and an estate. David gave him a business to manage and a staff to handle. He gave him a right-hand man, and he gave him responsibilities. There is one other chronic stress effect to see. Mephibosheth was living in a place called Lo-Debar, literally means the land of nothing. Mephibosheth's stress would have generated a sense of nothingness in his soul. Nothing makes sense. Nothing is working. Long-term stress generates a path to nothingness. Pretty soon the sufferer can be feeling, I am nothing. Listen to Mephibosheth's question to David. What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? It's a heartbreaking self-description, revealing the need to be noticed and the pain of being overlooked. Right there in the question is part of the kindness. David noticed him. David had done a lot of work to find Mephibosheth, and this was all part of the noticing process. A person in nothingness believes no one notices. A person in nothingness needs to be noticed. In fact, we all do. How many times have you experienced the kindness of someone who really notices you? Jesus of Nazareth, the ultimate son of David, specialized in noticing. In fact, his whole arrival on earth was an expression of noticing. David's kindness started with noticing, but it did not stop. There is a beautiful description of the nature of David's kindness. It is mentioned 4 times in the short account. It is contained in the phrase, "You will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth's stress started with a catastrophic traumatic day. Its impact was long-term. David's kindness started with noticing and a massive show of generosity. But, and this is the key, it turned into sustained long-term kindness. Long-term stress does not go overnight. It requires intervention for sure, but it also takes a long time to find a measure of recovery. Every day, Mephibosheth experienced the kindness of David. He always ate at his table. You may be the person in need of long-term kindness, of someone to notice you and care for you. It's possible that you might be the person to notice someone else in pain and bring kindness into their lives. David calls it God's kindness. God's kindness expressed through human kindness is a powerful antidote to chronic stress.